After 15 years at Ridgeway events and media, I sat in the office I had practically built from scratch, surrounded by gear I'd purchased with my own money, ideas I'd nurtured into full-blown systems, and memories of deadlines that nearly broke me. The laminated sign above my desk read, "Problem Solver in Chief," a joke from my team. Only now, the joke was on me. "Lisa," my boss Greg said, not meeting my eyes. "Due to restructuring, we're downsizing your position." I blinked once. The air conditioning hummed in the silence between us. He continued, "We're bringing in a new hire, fresh out of university. She'll be trained to handle media, event logistics, and, well, all the things you used to handle." This wasn't just a layoff. This was a replacement. A clean slate, a budget reset, a slap in the face after 15 years of doing 5 jobs for the price of one. "I understand," I said calmly, because I did. Not the logic, but the message. "You're too old, too expensive, too hard to control." Greg exhaled like he was relieved I wasn't making a scene. "You'll need to clear your office by Friday," he added, "and take everything that's yours. You won't be coming back." I smiled slightly. "Of course, I'll take everything that's mine." 15 years ago, I was hired as a media designer. Just that, one role. But when the marketing manager quit, I stepped up. When the events lead had a breakdown during a 500-person conference, I took over. When the AV supplier bailed last minute, I ran to my car, grabbed my own microphones, cables, lights, and got the job done. The company never bothered replacing missing gear, so I kept bringing mine in. Piece by piece, year by year. Camera rigs, light kits, spare cables, soundboards. And every piece had my name written on it, just in case. They always laughed at that detail. That detail would soon become everything. What they didn't know, what they never bothered to notice, was that their entire AV infrastructure, their live streaming setup, their mobile event unit, was mine. Not metaphorically, literally mine. By Thursday morning, I arrived early, before Greg, before the new girl, before HR, and I started packing. The first few boxes were easy. Labeled hard cases filled with mics, stands, and mixing decks. Then came the modular lights, wireless cams, HDMI extenders. I had every receipt saved in a neatly labeled folder on Google Drive. Then came the crown jewel, the control booth. Greg found me as I was unlocking the door with my own key. You can't take that stuff," he stammered. "Oh? Why not?" "It's essential to our event setup." I raised an eyebrow. "Yes, it is. That's why I brought it in. Want to see the receipts?" He hesitated, then gestured vaguely behind him. "Well, maybe just leave the booth gear, at least until we train the new girl." I smiled sweetly. "You said I wouldn't be coming back, Greg. I'm just doing exactly what you told me to do." I loaded up my Ford Explorer with help from Tara, one of the only coworkers who still had a soul. With every box we loaded, his face looked more and more like bad lighting at a gala, she whispered. By noon, half the storage closet was empty. Every piece of gear labeled LJ was mine. I knew because I'd labeled it. All those years of staying late to organize, repair, replace, now they were stacked neatly in cardboard boxes. By 2 p.m., the live stream equipment was gone. By 3:30, the backup servers I'd brought in for remote events, yep, gone too. Greg was pacing the hallway now, phone in hand, red-faced, whispering into his sleeve. They thought I was disposable. But they never once asked, what if everything we rely on leaves with her? When I finally drove off, my SUV sagging under the weight of a company's forgotten foundation, Greg stood at the curb, silent, confused. But it was Friday I left, and Monday would be fascinating. Because on Monday, Ridgeway Events had a high-profile event with over 300 guests, a live broadcast, and multiple feeds across 3 cities. And they no longer had the gear, or the woman who knew how to run it. Friday evening, I drove home with my car packed tighter than a moving truck. Every bump in the road made the lighting kits rattle, the mic stands shift. I glanced in the rearview mirror at the gear that had powered dozens of conferences, charity galas, and corporate launches. And I remembered something my dad once told me. Never loan out what you're not willing to lose. That advice had guided every decision I made in the last decade, including the one to put my name on every single item I ever brought into Ridgeway events. Greg had laughed at the time. Paranoid much? He joked. Now? I imagined him staring at the empty AV booth, realizing just how much of his infrastructure had never belonged to him at all. By the time I got home, my driveway looked like a film crew had moved in. My neighbor, Mike, leaned on the fence with a beer in hand. "Big shoot this weekend?" he asked. "Not exactly," I said, exhaling as I opened the trunk. "More like the end of an era." He offered to help carry things in. As we unloaded the boxes into my garage, I told him the short version, about how I'd been let go, how they brought in someone cheaper, how they told me to take everything that was mine, and how I had. He let out a low whistle. "So what are they going to do without all this?" "That's their problem now." Saturday morning, I opened my laptop and scrolled through the event calendar on Ridgeway's public website. Monday, the big one, the Northcrest Regional Education Conference. 3 cities, remote panels, keynote from the state superintendent, live streamed to over 2,000 viewers, and every year I was the one who made it happen. I knew their playbook inside and out, the gear required, the setup time, the backup plans, the cables no one else remembered to pack. And I knew that without me, or my equipment, they were in serious trouble. But I wasn't smiling. Not really. Because this wasn't just some petty revenge fantasy. It was personal. 15 years of giving everything. Missing birthdays, anniversaries, staying up until 2 a.m. to fix a crashed feed because there's no one else who knows how. I trained interns, built workflows, prevented disasters before they happened. And in the end, I wasn't even worth a real explanation. Just a canned line about downsizing and a 20-something with a shiny degree and no real experience waiting to take over my life's work. Sunday afternoon, I got a message from Tara. "Tara, hey, just a heads up. Greg's been calling people in a panic. Something about missing AV inventory and a broken livestream plan." I responded with a simple thumbs-up emoji. 30 minutes later, she called. "Lisa, I know you're done, but I need to tell you something. They had the intern try to set up tomorrow's event. She didn't even know what a DI box was. Greg actually asked if we could just Zoom it in with laptops. I nearly walked out." I closed my eyes. It was worse than I thought. "And the venue?" I asked. "New location this year. No built-in AV. They were counting on your kits. The wireless mics, the camera rig, the switcher. All gone." She paused. "He asked if I could maybe reach out to you. You know, just for a little help." I didn't answer right away. After a long silence, I said, "I wish I could help. But I'm just doing exactly what he told me. I took what was mine and left. I don't work there anymore." She sighed. "Didn't think you would. Just figured you should know what kind of chaos is coming." As the sun set, I walked out to my garage and flipped on the lights. Dozens of items sat neatly stacked and labeled. I ran my fingers over the lid of the road case that held the wireless transmitters, over the charger dock for the LED uplights, over the laminated emergency cable chart I made during a 3-day power outage. They hadn't just fired me. They'd amputated their only working limb and handed the scalpel to someone who didn't know which side was sharp. And now? Now they were about to try and walk on their own. Let's see how that goes. Monday was less than 12 hours away. I made tea, opened a new document on my laptop, and started writing. Not a resignation letter, not a rant. Something better, a pitch. Because after 15 years of being the invisible engine behind other people's success, I finally had a shot at building something of my own. And if Ridgeway Events wanted to burn down what we built together, I had every intention of rising from the ashes. I was halfway through my first sip of tea when the first call came in. Anonymous number. I didn't answer. Then a second, this time from Ridgeway's front desk. Still no. By 8 a.m., I had 3 missed calls, 1 voicemail, and a text from Tara that simply read, "They're falling apart. I've never seen Greg like this." I believed her, because I knew exactly what they were walking into. The Northcrest Regional Education Conference was Ridgeway's biggest spring event. It spanned 3 cities, each with its own tech setup, and required seamless live streaming, interactive Q&As, backup feeds, and content switching. I'd built every part of that process from the ground up, from color-coded cable routing to customized overlay graphics. And all of it? Gone. Still sitting, labeled and dust-free in my garage. At 8:32 a.m., I received a panicked voicemail from Greg. His voice was clipped and fast, like he'd already had too much coffee, or not enough sleep. "Lisa, hi, this is Greg. Look, I think there may have been some miscommunication about what equipment belonged to the company. We really need you to clarify a few things, urgently. This event is going sideways. Please call me back ASAP." I didn't. Instead, I opened my laptop and continued typing. The pitch deck was coming along nicely. A consulting and technical support brand for nonprofits and education conferences. Simple, clean branding, flat rates, transparent services. My tagline was almost too perfect. You don't need an agency. You need someone who gives a damn. At 9 a.m., Tara texted again. "They're trying to run everything through someone's personal iPad. Sound keeps cutting out. Audience is fidgeting. One of the panelists just said, 'Can anyone hear me?' Live on stream. They're asking for your setup diagrams. I told them I didn't have copies. I do, but I'm not giving them away for free." I smirked. Tara was loyal to a fault. And now they were finally realizing who their real backbone had been. By 10:15 a.m., my inbox lit up again. This time, it was from Alyssa, Ridgeway's marketing lead. "Hi, Lisa. I hope you're doing well. Greg asked me to reach out and see if there's any chance you'd be available for a quick consult today. He's willing to compensate you for your time. Please let me know if there's any way you can help." I stared at the email for a moment. Consult. That was the word. Not help, not save us, just consult. Which legally meant billable hours, progress. But I didn't reply. Not yet. At 11 a.m., I finally allowed myself a moment to relax. Tea gone cold, emails still piling up. I walked out to the garage and opened one of the hard cases, taking inventory. Everything was still pristine, ready to deploy, ready to earn me money instead of building someone else's empire. By noon, Ridgeway's livestream had been pulled offline. I didn't need Tara to tell me. Social media was already catching wind. A few conference attendees had tweeted about the failure. Biggest education event in the region can't keep their feed live for more than 30 seconds. Embarrassing. They fired the person who used to run this. That's what I heard. Wild. At 12:46 p.m., Greg called again. This time I answered. "Lisa, oh, thank God. Look, this whole thing has gotten out of hand." I didn't say anything. "I admit it," he continued. "I didn't realize how much of the AV stuff was actually yours. I should have asked more questions." Silence. "We need help. Just a few hours. I'll pay you personally if I have to." I finally spoke. "I appreciate the offer, Greg, but I don't do last-minute emergency calls for people who told me I was replaceable." He stammered. "I never said—" "You didn't need to. You said downsizing. You said, take everything that's yours." "I did. Now you're seeing what I left behind." Silence again. "Lisa, please." I sighed. "I'm happy to talk business. Not favors. Business, consulting, contracts, rates, the kind of professional respect I never got when I worked for you." Okay. Can you send over your terms?" "I already did." "You, what?" "Check your inbox." Because 15 minutes earlier, while he was busy begging, I had sent a branded quote with an emergency same-day consulting rate. 4 times my old hourly salary. and he had exactly 2 hours to accept before I turned off my phone. By 1 p.m., he'd signed. By 2 p.m., I was logged into their temporary stream remotely, stabilizing it with the same software I used for years, and walking Tara through a patched-together version of my original event workflow. And by 4 p.m., my invoice had been paid in full. No apologies, no recognition, just a confirmation email, and a note at the bottom. Please keep your availability open for future events. I closed my laptop. If they wanted me, they'd pay my rate. Not because I was bitter, but because knowing your value is only half the battle. The other half is making sure no one gets it for free. By Tuesday morning, I'd already had 3 inquiries, not from Ridgeway, from their competitors. One was a mid-sized conference group who had followed the Northcrest livestream and noticed something odd, that the stream quality had improved mid-event despite obvious tech hiccups earlier in the day. The organizer called it a mystery save. The second was a nonprofit in the education sector. They'd been at the event. Their director pulled me aside during the awkward lunch break and said, "I don't know what happened this morning, but someone fixed it. Was that you?" I simply nodded. "You freelance?" he asked. "I do now." I didn't sleep much that week. Not because I was stressed, not anymore, but because something inside me had clicked. Something I hadn't felt in years. Momentum. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was building. Every document I created, every client conversation, every minute spent updating my old logo. It felt like I was finally pouring all those invisible hours into something that was mine. But in the back of my mind, I couldn't stop thinking about how it all started. 15 years, no formal title changes, no bonuses for the overnight fixes, no official acknowledgement when I prevented a major security breach during an international live event. I was always just the media designer, even when I was also the AV lead, the backup coordinator, the vendor liaison, and the person who climbed the scaffolding at 6 a.m. to tape down a cable no one else noticed. And Greg? He was already shopping for his next intern. By Thursday, Ridgeway had another problem. They were scheduled to host a product launch for one of their major clients, a long-term contract that had been Lisa-dependent from the beginning. The client, a large tech firm, insisted on a full mock run of the event 48 hours ahead of time. It was standard. What wasn't standard was that the moment the client arrived at the venue, they realized something was off. No signal flow, no directional monitors, no backup rig, and no Lisa. Tara called me from the back loading dock, whispering, "They're trying to fake their way through this setup. The client's head of communications is furious. He literally said, 'Where's the woman who usually runs this? We don't want kids with clipboards. We want the expert.'" "Let me guess," I said. "They're stalling." Hard. Greg's sweating through his blazer. I almost felt bad. Almost. But then I remembered him sitting across from me just 1 week ago, arms folded, offering a 1-paragraph severance letter and the words, "Take everything that's yours." Now he was learning what that really meant. That evening, I got an email. Not from Ridgeway, but directly from the tech firm's comms director. "Hi, Lisa. I understand you're no longer with Ridgeway Events. A shame, considering every product launch we've done with them was a result of your preparation. Are you available for independent consultation?" That one email changed everything. Within 48 hours, I had signed my first official client under my new business name, LJ Event Systems. And the scope? Full technical consulting for all U.S. product launches for the next 12 months. Custom workflows. Equipment recommendations. Live support. Optional. My name on the contract. Not hidden in the background. Not borrowed. Mine. By the following Monday, Ridgeway's product launch had been downgraded to a static presentation. No live stream. No interactive panel. Just a slideshow and a podium mic that kept cutting out. The tech firm quietly canceled their multi-year event contract later that week. Tara forwarded me the internal memo. Greg blamed resourcing complications and unforeseen staffing transitions. He never once said my name, but I didn't need him to. My name was already appearing in other inboxes. recommended by that same tech firm to 3 of their partner companies, all asking the same thing. Are you available? We're looking for someone reliable. We heard what you did. That Friday, a package arrived on my doorstep. Inside was a small glass plaque. It wasn't flashy, just a single line of engraving. In recognition of everything you held together. Tara. I stood there for a long time, plaque in hand, blinking back tears. Not because I needed validation, but because after so many years of being unseen, it felt like someone had finally noticed. I sent Tara a thank you message. She didn't reply right away. Later, I'd find out she was prepping for her final exit interview. She'd had enough, too. Greg had underestimated the cost of losing me. What he didn't realize yet was that the fallout was just beginning. You can fire the person, but you can't fire the foundation they built out from under you and expect the building to stay standing. By the 3rd week, Ridgeway had lost 2 more clients. It wasn't loud or dramatic. There was no scandal or leaked memo, just quiet cancellations one after another. Events postponed indefinitely. Budgets reevaluated. Decision-makers ghosting Greg's follow-up emails. I wasn't celebrating. At least not in the gloating, champagne-popping way you might expect. Because while Ridgeway was unraveling, I was drowning in opportunity. Word had gotten around. That woman who saved the Northcrest conference? The one who built Ridgeway's entire tech infrastructure on her own dime and walked away with it? Yeah, her. Suddenly, I wasn't just getting interest from clients. I was getting approached by vendors, equipment suppliers, venue managers, people I'd worked alongside for over a decade who finally knew my name. Lisa, if you ever need lighting rigs for your own shows, we'll cut you a great deal. Hey, we've got some beta gear we'd love for you to test, if you're interested. We're short-staffed for the Education Futures Summit. Any chance you'd consult? The irony wasn't lost on me. At Ridgeway, I was the person people emailed after they'd talked to everyone else. Now, I was the first name on the list. Tara officially left Ridgeway that Wednesday. She didn't make a scene. No farewell speech, just a quiet lunch with 2 other colleagues who had already handed in their notice. They offered me a loyalty bonus to stay. She told me on the phone that evening, her voice dry with sarcasm. Can you believe that? I laughed. Did you take it? Nope. I accepted a job with one of the nonprofit clients you worked with last year. They offered me a better salary, better hours, and they actually asked me what I wanted out of the role. I was proud of her. Not just for leaving, but for finally choosing herself. That was the real revenge, wasn't it? Not watching a company fail, but watching good people finally recognize their worth and walk out on their own terms. On Friday afternoon, I got a call I didn't expect. It was from Naomi Carter, the CFO of Ridgeway's parent company. I'd only met her once at a corporate holiday party where she introduced herself politely, then spent the next 20 minutes talking to Greg about quarterly performance indicators while I poured wine for the sponsors. Lisa, good to speak with you, she said coolly. Likewise, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. I wanted to follow up regarding the Northcrest recovery and the product launch situation. I waited. She continued, We've reviewed the recent event outcomes, client losses, and technical issues. It's clear that Ridgeway underestimated your role in the infrastructure. That's on us. There was a long pause. I'd like to offer you a formal consulting retainer, she said, directly through corporate, not Ridgeway. We'd like your support on 3 upcoming projects. Your experience is difficult to replace. It was almost an apology. Almost. But more importantly, it was recognition from the top, the kind that actually meant something. I told her I'd consider it, then emailed her a quote the next morning. My rate, my terms, no discounts, no favors. She agreed within the hour. Meanwhile, Greg wasn't doing so well. Tara had stayed connected to a few people still inside Ridgeway. Word spread that senior leadership had started auditing budgets, client feedback, and project timelines. Apparently, someone had finally asked the right question. How did we let her go without knowing what she was responsible for? According to Tara, Greg's answer had been, "We thought she was just operations." Just operations. The person who built the media systems from scratch. The person who trained every intern, wrote the setup guides, managed every major broadcast Ridgeway had ever delivered. It was laughable. But it was also typical. Companies love to use words like team and family when things are going well. But the moment money gets tight, the first heads on the chopping block are the ones who say yes too often and make miracles look routine. By the end of that month, Ridgeway lost its largest annual client, a healthcare group that had contracted them for 10 years straight. I knew the organizer. She sent me a LinkedIn message. "They said you weren't with the company anymore." I told them, "No, Lisa, no contract. Just wanted you to know." That was the moment it truly hit me. I hadn't just been a part of Ridgeway. I had been Ridgeway for a long time. They just never bothered to see it, until it was too late. And yet, I didn't feel rage, or even triumph, just clarity. Because when you spend years doing the work of 5 people, constantly proving your value, constantly being told you're lucky to be here, you start to believe it's true. That being needed is the same as being respected. But they're not the same. And now that I had finally drawn that line, I wasn't going back. Not for Ridgeway. Not for anyone. 3 months after I walked out of Ridgeway events, I stood backstage at the Lakeside Civic Auditorium, clipboard in hand, headset snug against my ear, watching a room of 800 people take their seats for the Education Futures Gala. My show. Not Ridgeway's. Not Greg's. Mine. LJ Event Systems had landed its 5th contract in just 8 weeks. Our calendar was booked through the fall. I had hired 2 part-time AV techs and a virtual assistant. I wasn't just busy. I was finally in control. "Camera 2, stand by," I said into the mic. "We're live in 3, 2. The live stream began without a hitch. Smooth, polished, precise. The way it always was. Only now the credit wasn't going to someone else. Later that night, as the applause faded and the audience filed out, I checked my email for any post-event feedback. Among the client messages and vendor updates was one that made me freeze. Subject: Ridgeway request. It was from Naomi Carter again. "Lisa, I hope this message finds you well. Ridgeway Events has undergone a series of internal changes. Greg Reynolds has officially resigned. We've also parted ways with 2 other senior staff members. We are reevaluating the company's structure and would like to extend an offer for you to return, not to your old role, but to lead a new division focused on event technology strategy and consulting. You would report directly to me." I read the message twice, then a 3rd time. They weren't just asking me back. They were offering me leadership, authority, autonomy, a chance to rebuild the house they had once tossed me out of. But I'd already built something better. I clicked reply and typed slowly, carefully. "Hi, Naomi. Thank you for the update and the generous offer. I'm proud of the work I did at Ridgeway, but I've since moved on to pursue my own path. LJ Event Systems is now fully operational, and I'm focused on growing something that reflects my values: accountability, respect, and ownership. I do wish Ridgeway the best during this transition. Let me know if you'd like to discuss licensing access to any of our technical frameworks. Happy to talk business. Just not employment. Warmly, Lisa Jennings, founder, LJ Event Systems." I hovered over send for a moment, then clicked. It didn't feel spiteful. It felt final. A week later, I was invited to speak on a panel for women in media tech. The topic? What happens when they replace you and you replace yourself with something better? I shared the full story. The silent burnout. The downsizing. The moment I was told to take everything that's yours. The realization that everything that made Ridgeway work had been quietly carried in and cared for by me, year after year. After the panel, a young woman approached me. She looked nervous. Early 20s, maybe a year out of college. "Hi, I just wanted to say thank you. I was recently told by my boss that people like me don't last in this industry. I was thinking of quitting. But your story..." She hesitated. "It reminded me that I'm not crazy. that some of us really are doing everything and getting none of the credit. I smiled. You're not crazy. You're just ahead of the curve. Document everything. Put your name on your work. And don't wait until someone gives you permission to own your value. She nodded, teary-eyed. That moment alone made it all worth it. By the end of that quarter, Ridgeway had lost 4 long-term clients. Their stock among vendors and sponsors had taken a hit. Meanwhile, LJ Event Systems had signed with 2 national nonprofits and was negotiating its first licensing deal with an AV platform provider, using diagrams, documents, and systems I'd developed long ago. On nights no one at Ridgeway ever knew I stayed late to finish. Not out of obligation, but because I cared. They never understood that. They just assumed I was lucky to have a job. Now they were lucky if they could get me on the phone. As I sat at my desk one evening, sorting through proposals and onboarding forms, I looked around my new office. A converted space above a co-working studio, bright with natural light, covered in sticky notes, whiteboards, and cables coiled neatly on the shelves. Everything here was mine. And more importantly, everything here was built from scratch, not stolen or borrowed or downsized. At 56, I had finally achieved what no promotion could ever give me: agency, ownership, and respect, on my own terms. Because when Greg told me, "Take everything that's yours," he had no idea what that included. It wasn't just my lights and cameras. It wasn't just my workflow or expertise. It was my power. And now, I'll never hand it over for free again.